I now call the honourable member for Solomon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, the government's immigration network is indeed in crisis. The system is out of control. As a consequence of Labor's failure, our detention network is stretched beyond its capacity. When the Coalition left government, only 4 people who had arrived illegally by boat were in detention. Today, that figure is more than 6,300, including more than 1,000 children. I'm calling on the Gillard Labor government to assure Darwin residents and the Northern Territorians that they will be safe, given recent events that have occurred on Christmas Island. If you wanted a more visible example of the depth of the crisis Labor have created with their failed border protection policies, you need look no further than the Asti Motel in the suburban Darwin. On March 16th this year, 100 detainees walked out of the hotel heading downtown to Darwin. Mr Speaker, this isn't people rioting and escaping from a remote or secure facility. We've experienced riots and protests. They did. We've experienced riots and protests and breakouts from the Berrima Secure Facility as recently as last week. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, Territorians are enduring riots beside residential houses. The Asti Motel is surrounded by houses and units right in the suburb of Darwin. My office is inundated by calls from residents who no longer feel safe and secure in their own homes. This is actually outrageous, Mr Speaker. I cannot understand why my constituents should have to feel frightened and insecure in their own homes. Experiencing riots on their front lawns as a direct result of the Gillard Labor government failed border protection policy. Mr Deputy Speaker, Territorians are not watching riots on TV, they are watching riots outside their bedroom windows. Now, Mr Speaker, the Northern Territory Police Service and Royal Darwin Hospital, like many of the other services that are provided in the Northern Territory, are already stretched to capacity. How can this Labor government say that there's going to be no pressure on Territory services as a result of their failed border protection policies? Well, in September 2010, when the 90 detainees escaped from the Berrima Detention Facility and staged an all-day-long protest on the road, there had to be a significant impact on NT police resources. This is just one example. There has been a number of breakouts. As I said, there were people walking down the mall. It's just disgusting. Anyway, there's also the case where there were riots which has resulted in hospitalisations at Royal Darwin Hospital. Now, Territorians will all know that Royal Darwin Hospital is stretched to capacity, but this failed border protection policy won't impact on Northern Territory services at all. Mr Speaker, it gets worse. Asylum seekers are being housed in residential apartments in the suburbs. How can this be, Mr Speaker, when Darwin is experiencing the worst housing crisis and this government is trying to hide these people by renting the apartments under a veil of secrecy? This is typical of this government. They hide the facts from Australians. They have formed, Mr Speaker, when the plans for another onshore detention facility was announced recently in Darwin. They said it would cost $9.2 million. But as we know, it was going to cost $83 million, and that's just for starters, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is the Northern Territory News front page outlining it all. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Labor government's failed border protection policies are costing Australians hundreds of millions of dollars each year, money that could be spent on vital services and infrastructure. The $83 million that has been identified as the cost to build the new detention facility in Darwin could be spent on building other things like 3 new schools, 4 new cancer centres, nearly 1,000 nurses in our hospitals. What about 900 police officers on our street? Maybe build 5 new suburbs. And this money could even establish 8 new GP super clinics that the government has failed to deliver. It is a lot of money. It goes without saying that this $83 million could even have gone a long way towards replacing infrastructure damaged in the floods and the cyclones of the past summer. Further, Mr Speaker, I've received an email which is typical of concerns that I'm receiving from constituents in my electorate, and I'd like to share that with you. Dear Mrs Griggs, I just want to express my disgust about the government building yet another detention centre, especially in Darwin. I am so annoyed that we can find the money to support overseas illegal immigrants, yet we can't find the money to build a second hospital for Darwin. These people are costing the country a hell of a lot of money, and it gets up my nose. Building this facility in Darwin will put a drain on our resources. Yes, it may create some jobs. However, try and organise a plumber or an electrician in Darwin. Some of these guys won't even go near normal households because they're too busy working on large-scale government projects. Every time an illegal immigrant gets sick, they will be putting a drain on our health system. We as Territorians want wait a long time at A&E. Now we'll be pushed even further down the queue because of these people. My daughter attends Durack's school, and she quite often comes home with raffle tickets so that the school can fundraise to purchase the most basic items for the school. Government schools should get this funding automatically. If we can afford to spend the money on decent accommodation for the illegal immigrants, along with all the other privileges that they receive, why can't we afford to look after our schools? Natasha, please turn back the boats. Spend the money on Australians. There are a lot of them out there that need our money. Please have a look at this article I watched on a current affair. It's the Saving Vicky. This lady needs our money, and as a taxpayer, I am more than happy to support this lady. I'm not happy paying for illegal immigrants. There's also a number of text messages that I would like to share. These are from the Northern Territory News. Why riot and protest? If they are unhappy, I would happily pay a one-off tax to send them home. Another one. So, more beds for detainees and prisoners. Why not more beds for the hospital? Or, tell the rioting asylum seekers they just failed the test and deport them. In Australia, non-compliance has consequences. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, Territorians are not racist. We just want border protection policies that work. The Territory does not want to be the Commonwealth's social experiment and our constitutional weakness used so that Labor can dump their problems and outcomes of their bad policies on us. We want genuine economic opportunities, not those that come from bad Labor policy. The Territory has a strong multicultural background, and Territorians welcome people from all cultural backgrounds. But Labor are taking advantage of Territorians' goodwill. Accepting refugees does not mean we accept Labor's policy. We have a housing crisis and increasingly our own economic refugees because of the cost of living rises under this terrible, terrible Labor government. We know if there's a carbon tax introduced, Territorians will pay more because the carbon tax is going to be a tax on remoteness and rural Australia, and it's going to impact the cost of living in the Territory, which we're already experiencing very, very high pressures. Territorians want a guarantee from this secretive and deceptive government that Labor's failed border protection policies will not impact on the safety, the security and the economic welfare of Territorians. It's an interesting fact, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this government, this Labor government, has built more detention beds in the Northern Territory than it has hospital beds. Palmerston people are waiting for a new hospital, but what do they get? A new detention centre. Maybe the minister will turn the detention centre into a hospital when he fixes his border protection policy. My beef is not with the businessmen who are building the detention centre at Wickham Point. My beef is with this deceitful Labor government whose failed border protection policies have made it necessary and who clearly cannot be trusted. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.